Alright guys, Mickey again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day. So far, the roster drama continues. Cloud9 centre of the discussion. It seems they do finally have a roster, but not the roster they might initially have wanted after loads of players rejected their poverty offer. They are left with this team of players that wouldn't even have been super in the conversation at the top part of Challengers Rostermania. But here we are, regardless. Maybe this team will do well. Wishing the players, if they do sign, the best. But Enable says if Cloud9 does get this team, they should be kicked out of the league by the COD League itself. Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Lots to get into. First, we wanted to start here because there was quite the drama shortly after the major about the spots that Neptune used in the grand finals, especially this one that you guys can see right at the start of the video where he hops up here on Scar. Now, look, is this a fair spot? Is this a reasonable spot? There are a load of questions on that. It may have to be a case-by-case basis. Neptune said, look, if Shotzzy used that spot, everyone would be gassing him up. And Shotzzy even replied and said, look, it's no big deal. Neptune, use the spots. Now's the time to use them, whatever. But Dashy was asked about this on the OpTic podcast and gave an interesting perspective. He basically said he thought they were GA'd in the same way that OpTic thought that Ordnance gloves were GA'd back in Modern Warfare 3. And then famously New York subliners, they started to put out these cross-map nades and started killing everyone. And then, okay, the players decided, okay, I guess it's not GA'd. So again, goes to show how bad the GA system is, that people aren't even sure what's banned and what's not. But Dashy says that, some of the spots, probably fine. Some of the spots he thought were GA'd. Potentially just because it looks like it should be. That spot on the Scar there, especially, bit of a pixel walk. Looks almost like you're kind of stair glitching it. It's obviously not intended by the developers, you wouldn't imagine. So obviously it's always kind of controversial, and you could argue that some spots are fine, some spots aren't. OpTic clearly had the perspective that spots like that were GA'd, and that's why OpTic seemingly didn't use it, because Karma said on stream shortly after the finals that, Shotzzy and Huke, they were aware of those spots, but they didn't use them in the tournament. They didn't use them in the finals because, they believed it was not necessarily fair game. That was OpTic's interpretation of the gentleman's agreements. Clearly, Neptune and Gentlemates had a different interpretation of those gentleman's agreements. So, look, who knows? The reality is, if it was fair game then, and if the developers don't change anything, then presumably it's going to be fair game from now on. Later today, we will discuss even if Scar Search and Destroy will stay in the game, because it might well not. But also, it's not like these maps are exclusive, or these spots are exclusive to the map like Scar. There are plenty of other spots that players have come up with as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting. We also have an official Burger King card. Here it is. The Burger King of the stage goes to aBeZy. Shocking stage for Surge. They did somehow manage to get top 8 at the major because I guess Ravens are even more fraudulent on LAN. TJ was actually purple kills per round in Search, but Lunarz was pretty much a 1 flat across all the game modes. He had a respectable performance, all things considered, performed better at the major. Gwinn was underwhelming for sure, given that there was quite a bit of talk about, Gwinn wants to go to this team to play with Lqgend. Then of course Legends gets sacked in favour of TJ. They don't really get much better, but aBeZy had a 58 card overall, which is pretty ugly. That was the worst number of the stage. He's got the Burger King cards. Congratulations. He had a shocking time on LAN as well. Do I think he's better than these numbers suggest? Yeah, I do. And he was on Toronto at the World Cup last year. Did a great job for that team. But maybe aBeZy in a weak team is just not an aBeZy in a strong team. Maybe we give him a little bit more time, and I don't think Surge are going to make any changes because, they're committed at this point to just being down there at the bottom. Maybe there's something to be said about that. There was even a little bit of talk about could Toronto be interested in getting aBeZy back. Obviously, on this performance, you wouldn't imagine yes, but equally, he did pretty well with that core last year. Xceed actually says down one of us, right? Because the Burger King card has spread out and Xceed had a rather better card than that. But, well, obviously not much better when he was the Burger King himself, but this stage Xceed played better online, that is for sure. But let's talk about the roster drama, certainly in the Pro League. Rafi says another one signed up to the league, it seems, and, well, there's loads of rumours as to what's going on in Rostermania. First of all, lots of the developments in Challengers Rostermania at the top end have been held up by Cloud9 trying to form a team, which they may now have done, but even then, it may not be totally final. Mack and Vivid, who are on the Cloud9 team, they've been dropped. They will apparently remain as a duo in Challengers. Of course, they had some success with Omit at the end of last season. They are set to team with Geo and Yuli, so that will be a very strong Challengers force. Unclear, therefore, what happens with Awakening and 2ReeAL. Rupert and Asim have also been let go from the Falcons Academy as they look to revamp their rosters. I think Zuma was actually, yeah, here we go, in the replies to this one. So with Asim maybe available, I don't know, Zuma's obviously going to be thinking about the Stallions rebuild, especially when it comes to these players that we are going to mention in a second. So Ronnie comes out with this article yesterday, Cloud9 eyes prospects in rebuild. So if you guys aren't familiar with the story, as far as we understand, Cloud9 were paying this team $48,000 apiece. They then told the team, we are now going to cut that salary in half. It's going to be $24,000 for the season. And if you don't want to accept that, then we will be letting you go and we will be getting somebody else in instead. Again, there has been some conversation as to whether they're actually able to really do this or exactly what the legal circumstances around such a decision might be. But regardless, get the lawyers on that one. The point is that Cloud9 have been trying desperately over the last few days to actually get anyone to accept their offer. Because for actual prospects, right, people who we thought could be in the league and maybe will be in the near future, this doesn't sound especially compelling. So, we thought that Okis was going to be joining. He was Stallion's Black member, of course, former Fortnite player, and he definitely turned a few heads, but it's not like he was an absolute standout of the Challengers tournament in Dallas. His team finished top 16 in the end, right? Yeah, he played well, but it's not like they played top teams in the latter half of the tournament and you could really get to see where they stood. However, attracting players has been a problem, right? We did talk about the option of, okay, let's say you're a Falcons Academy player or you're playing for some other team in Challengers or whatever, even a pro team, like let's say OpTic, you're a Huntsman, for example. Maybe you pay them some money as a loan, they then get the salary, but that team is still kind of financing the player's salary to a degree. Maybe it could work in that scenario. But even if that could potentially work, the problem you run into is that the team is very, very unlikely to be competitive at all on these type of figures. And as we've said over the last few days, they can kind of get away with this because of the franchise system. They presumably pay some money to the league every year to stay in the league, and they're not going to get kicked out unless they decide to sell. Jack Etienne said it. He's had interest to sell, but he's not interested. And that means that you've got teams in... I mean, the team that they're apparently forming here will be worse than a significant number of top challenger teams that quite possibly will be getting paid more than these guys in the Pro League. And yet, in historical COD, they would lose their spot in promotion relegation. But in this scenario, that is not how it is. So it's understandable, because people are wondering, well, is anyone going to take the offer? What if literally everybody says no? Look, the reality is, at some point, someone's going to say yes. And I don't blame them, right? You take some money rather than zero money to play in the Pro League. You give yourself an opportunity to show that you've got what it takes. And look, it probably crashes and burns. But look, who knows? Maybe one of the players on this team is enough of a standout that they keep their spot in the league. So I can understand the logic. And this is why Cloud9, as frustrating as it is from the fan perspective, it's understandable kind of what they're doing, because they're like, well, we'll offer pennies, but someone's going to say yes. And that means we can still go to the World Cup at the end of the year and collect some money there. However, if you're terrible, what's the point, right? The whole idea of this is that Cloud9, they're part of the Esports World Cup partnership program. They want to be part of more esports so they can do better in the overall championship and make more money that way. But if your team's bombing out top 16, then what does it matter, right? So I'm a little bit confused by the whole strategy, really. But QK apparently said no. Renegade and Kips This is unconfirmed, but reportedly they also said no, and now this is the team they're looking at. So they're looking at Encourage, Zuma's golden child from the Stallions Red. He might be joining this team alongside Okis, and then a duo from Omit in Icons and Nate, who may be joining as well. So they've got until tomorrow to finalise their roster before the roster lock. Renegade and Kip's rumoured to have declined this offer, and therefore this is the rumoured team of 4. Now, there have been some bad teams in the CDL, the Paris Legion from a couple of years back, the Falcons, of course, from last year were pretty shocking. This, on paper, has got to be down there, right? Am I saying they're going to challenge OpTic's 0-18 run? Not necessarily. But still, right, like, this team winning a series is going to be a challenge, to say the very least, and this apparently is what Cloud9 are putting together. Look, I think these are players with some potential, don't get me wrong, but it's like you're putting just 4 players with some potential on the same team, no veteran, no leader, you know, we just send it and we hope that it works. Like, Godspeed to Ariane, who's trying to coach this team to some success. The funny thing about this is, well, not just their placings, because apparently there's some other names that have been mentioned too, and even Zuma says that potentially this isn't a done deal yet. They might still change their mind on some of these players, but if they change their mind, it's not going to be for someone that you've heard of, right? So, you know, and of course I've heard of these players, but like, their results were not strong. They placed top 24 in Dallas, all of these guys, apart from Okis, who was top 16. They're all within their first couple of years of competing. Potentially a long and strong future ahead of them for sure, but all on the same roster? I just don't buy it, right? And apparently during Challengers Rostermania, or basically this team, Okis, Icons and Nate, they were a team for a day, and they played one scrim set. It didn't go to plan, and they blew it up. So you're now telling me that you put these 3 guys with Encourage, and that's now the magical solution. So yeah, it's pretty amazing, isn't it, that this trio could potentially reunite in the Pro League. This is Benjay's thoughts on, like, look, these guys are just getting set up to fail bad. And you've also got to consider, right, like, Major 2, only 10 teams even go. Like, they're about to run up 11 qualifier matchups. And they've, you know, first of all, they've got to try not to go 0-11 in the qualifiers. And even if they go 1-10, 2-9, 3-8, maybe, then, I mean, that might be a stretch. But even if they do, they might not even go anyway. If they're right at the bottom of the league, they won't even get invited to go to Birmingham. So I just don't really see the point. And this is what aBeZy says. He's like, look, we're in this situation now. We've got this like pseudo franchise league where they've given back the franchise fees, but effectively there's no way that Cloud9 will get removed unless they decide to remove themselves and sell. This is why the relationship they have in Valorant is more compelling in many ways. So in Valorant, it's not a franchise league, it's a partner league. Effectively, Riot Games, in our situation, it'd be Activision, Blizzard, Microsoft, or whatever, they choose the orgs they partner with. And every few years, they renew those agreements or they don't. So if in the hypothetical Cloud9 says outright, yeah, we're paying the bare minimums, we're not trying at all to grow the scene or to do anything apart from just make a small profit by being in this league, Riot Games will say, it's been a pleasure, but it's time to go, right? And, you know, they are in Valorant, Cloud9. They can't get away with quite the same tactics or they know they'll get kicked out of the league. But in COD they can, because if Jack Etienne says no to anyone buying him, then it is what it is. So I think this is the question on whether at some point the league might need to step in here. I'm not saying that they can exactly force them to sell their spots, but there might have to be some sort of dynamic to say, look, our partners in this league have to fulfill certain level of obligations or attempts to actually support the growth of the league. Otherwise, we will negate their ability to compete in the Pro League. Because, look, if this continues and Cloud9 turn up with this roster and they go 0-11, they don't even go to the major, they're just completely useless. Nobody cares about watching these guys' games because they're terrible. You know, and I do have some belief in the individuals. I actually think that some of these guys could become something in the Pro League, but like all of them together at the same time, surely it's just a recipe for absolute disaster. Zuma says there's even more players rumoured to Cloud9, haven't yet been leaked to it, might not be over yet, but look, everyone turned them down. This is where we stand, and you know, what next, right, for the Pro League? It's a good question. Even Formal and Ghosty think that this Cal guy might be the next up, and he's been spotted in ranked play, so maybe that's where Cloud9 need to turn their attention. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
I have like
I have the mid front.
Yeah. Not weak.
Yeah, you know, sometimes you just gotta do your 25, man. You get a dub. See what it feels like to be Brandon with Merc. Nice, Mace! The fuck? The fuck?
We showed up to play today.